Hello everybody, I'm Mr. ZINZZZIN. Today I tell you the most thrilling and horror-esque stories. Please subscribe, share and enjoy. Fergie's latest submission house sitting spurred me on to recount these events. Throughout my life I have had very vivid dreams which on many occasions have actually become reality. I also tend to get flash images of people and events. When I see people, for whatever reason, they seem to appear in the corner of my left eye. I know that sounds crazy. I am not talking about seeing deceased people only. Approximately a year ago I had a very vivid dream about Pop, my deceased father-in-law. All his grandchildren called him Pop. In fact, our grandchildren also call my husband Pop. Well, the dream that I had about Pop was that he was trying to get me to board a plane, which I did not want to do. I won't go into specifics about that, as this account is not about a dream. In fact, after I turned the dream around in my mind, it turned out to be figurative and he was quite right in trying to get me to board the plane, which in my dream I did not do but in reality actually did do. Excellent advice from Pop. After this dream I kept seeing Pop in my left eye. I would love to know whether other members have experienced this. He was always wearing a white and blue checked shirt, which he often wore in life. I tried talking to him out loud, in my mind, but got no reaction whatsoever. All he did was appear in my mind. Eventually I had this brainwave. He was trying to communicate with his son, my husband, but could not do so. If a ghost were to hit Brian over the head with a cricket bat he wouldn't acknowledge it. So, in my mind, Pop was using me to get his son to communicate with him. I duly told Brian to sit quietly, on his own, and to talk to his father. I told him that what he said did not matter, just please try to communicate because your father is driving me nuts. He duly did so, probably just to get me out of his hair, but said he didn't feel a thing. He did not feel the presence of his father at all. Fast forward about 10 days to 2 weeks. My son had alarming news regarding his financial situation. He is happily married and has 2 children, a daughter and a son. Craig is a highly qualified electronic engineer and was earning a very good income. Because of the problems with the mines in ZINZZZIN, which were and still are the main source of income in his company, he had to take a 30% decrease in his salary. This would affect anybody pretty badly. You live according to your income, and although he isn't a spendthrift, he and his family had to lower their lifestyle very drastically. Now the following event was witnessed by his wife and a very good friend of his. One Saturday afternoon he had been mowing his lawn when his friend arrived at his house with a few beers. At this stage Craig was still feeling very low, wondering how he was going to cope with private schooling for his kids and so on. At the moment ZINZZZIN private schooling is the way to go because of various reasons. That is a topic best left untouched. Craig had noticed a young dove which seemed to hop from tree to tree while he was mowing the lawn. When he and his friend sat down in the garden to enjoy a beer, this dove perched itself on his shoulder. His friend actually took a few pics of it on his cell phone. No, I don't have those pics to send you. This dove sat on his shoulder, according to Craig, his wife and his friend, for at least half an hour before Craig took it off of his shoulder and put it on the branch of a tree. It then flew off. He and I discussed this incident and we both agreed that the dove was the spirit of Pop. I have never again experienced the presence of Pop. Just to mention, Craig was very close to him and he was very proud of this specific grandchild for a number of reasons, achievements under adversity and so on. I would really love to know what people think of this. To me it was just too much to be mere coincidence. Melda, I am currently 7 months pregnant with my second child, and while we have almost always had something going on in our home, I noticed something different. I was around 2 months pregnant at the time that we started getting new activity in the house. Of course the prankster still messes with our kitchen clocks from time to time, nothing unusual. But then as we started bringing things for the baby into the house like diapers, clothes and her crib, I noticed that there was a strong combination of both anxiety and anger in our home for a few days. I thought maybe I'm just being over-emotional between out-of-whack hormones, getting ready for the baby and trying to get my oldest daughter Maggie into a special needs pre-K class, which anyone with an autistic or Down syndrome child knows that it's a lot testing, evaluations, paperwork and usually a waiting list, so needless to say things have been a bit wired. Later that night as I was putting the bedding on the crib I felt a strong quick tug on my PJ pants. I looked down expecting Maggie to be there needing a drink or to go potty, but she wasn't. I peeked into her room and saw her sleeping soundly as her moon and star projector quietly hummed on her nightstand. I walked over to switch off the tiny projector and cover her back up when I heard small shuffled footsteps going down the hallway towards the living room. I looked down the hall but saw only a short shadow round the corner and vanish. I thought it strange but didn't think about it too much, seeing that nothing happened for the rest of the night. A few days later I was folding some baby clothes, putting them away, and decided to take a break to fix lunch for Maggie and I. While I was making our sandwiches I heard her say, "No, that's mean," in Colin in my room. I automatically stopped what I was doing to go see what Maggie was into, knowing that she normally says something along those lines when she knows she is doing something she shouldn't, almost like she is getting onto herself before she does it. When I got to the bedroom some of the clothes were unfolded and sprawled out around the crib. Maggie picked them up and handed them to me, smiling, "I'm a big girl." I took them from her and folded them quickly, asking her not to unfold them again and put them on our bed to finish later. She looked at me confused and followed me out of the bedroom. Later that night I went to finish laundry only to find the baby clothes knocked off the foot of the bed with Colin's work hat and box cutter laying in the middle of them. Assuming he had simply knocked them over while changing and didn't bother picking up his things or the mess he made, I was a bit miffed. I put his things away from work and sat down to finish folding the baby clothes when he walked in and sat down beside me. "What happened here?" he asked, picking up a few outfits and folding them, putting them in a pile. "I thought you already did these." I took a deep breath, trying not to snap at him. "I did, but you must have knocked them over when you were changing." He looked at me strangely and said, "No, they were still folded when I walked out." I explained to him that his hat and box cutter were in the middle of the clothes when I came in, and he said that while he had left them on the foot of the bed he didn't knock over the clothes. I apologized and we went on with our night, setting up a few more odds and ends, all the while wondering how they got knocked over. Maggie hadn't been back in there since the first time it happened, and Colin said he didn't do it. Clothes don't just grow legs and jump on their own, but I didn't see the point in dragging on the topic, so I left it be and went to bed. I was restless that night and couldn't sleep. Something just felt off in the house. Maggie was resting and so was Colin, so what could possibly be wrong? I went into the kitchen and got a drink when one of Maggie's toy trucks lit up and started playing music. I went into the living room and switched it off, knowing that the only way it could turn on was if someone pushed the button. Someone or something obviously wanted my attention. It's the only thing that added up. First the clothes and later the toy truck. I walked around the living room looking for anything else to be out of place, but nothing was. I could feel eyes on me, I just couldn't tell from what direction, and as I scanned the room I couldn't see anything out of the norm. Not even a shadow. I was tired and frustrated not knowing what was in my house. So finally I said, "I know someone is in here with me, and I know you were the one who messed with the baby clothes and turned on the truck. Can you please just show yourself, or at least show me where you are?" A few minutes went by and nothing happened. I could still feel someone there watching me, but I could not see them, which only made me a bit more nervous. I once again searched the living room and dining room, studying every corner and eventually every room of the house. Nada. So I turned the lights out and was about to try and lay down when I noticed Maggie's projector was flickering on and off through her partially open door. Thinking she woke up and was playing with the switch, I opened the door the rest of the way to find her sitting on her bed staring at her floor, giggling. She turned to me, still laughing, and said, "Look, girl." I walked around to the other side of her bed and only saw a small shadow sitting there. How could Maggie see her well enough to know that the child was a girl? But I couldn't. I've rarely had difficulties seeing spirits, but yet this one was mostly hiding from me. Why? The more I tried to focus on the shadow, the less I could see. "Bye," Maggie said, waving at her while I watched the small shadow pass right through her window. So I tucked Maggie in and went to bed myself, knowing I had to be up early for a doctor appointment the next day. I tossed and turned, only getting a few hours sleep. I couldn't get the childlike figure out of my head. Why would she come here? Was she simply curious of Maggie? And why was she so curious? Mischief concerning the baby's things leaving the biggest question: why wouldn't she let me see her? After a checkup with my doctor, I went home and did a thorough cleansing of the house, opening all the doors, windows and dark spaces, spreading positive energy all through the house. I had a little bit more peace of mind and went on with my day as usual. Nothing happened for weeks, until I was making our bed and I kept feeling eyes on me from the bedroom door. When I turned around, I saw a light, short, messy-haired little girl with wide green eyes that seemed emotionless, staring back at me, wearing a simple light blue dirty dress with no pattern, just a flat bib-type collar and waist strings untied. No shoes, and what looked like red clay stains on her hands, feet and part of her legs. Her thin lips formed a hard line as she studied my every move. I knelt down in front of her, smiling. She quickly scooted away from me and just watched, seeming to wait for something to happen. Almost like a scared animal backed in a corner, but her eyes remained emotionless. "Thank you for letting me see you," I said softly, not wanting her to become frightened and leave. "Can you tell me your name?" She said and did nothing until she quickly reached for my hand, which I willingly held out to her, though I couldn't really feel her touch. She looked like she was trying to smell me, though her eyes never left mine until she quickly dashed down the hall into Maggie's room, almost as if she was looking for her, but she wasn't there. Maggie was still at the sitter's house. The little girl sat in the corner, her knees tucked to her chest, and just stared at me. I asked her if she wanted help moving on, but she said nor did anything. She almost looked sad. Once again I tried approaching her, but this time she wasn't having it. She darted past me, and when I went to look for her, she was nowhere to be found. Months have passed and I have only saw her one other time, sitting next to the crib looking into it, but as soon as she saw me she vanished. I have asked Colin if he has seen her, but he said no. I have dreamed of her once since then, sitting in a barn, hiding in what looked like a horse stall, quickly eating something, her wide eyes darting in every direction. She looked terrified but satisfied, if that makes any sense. She snuck out and was gathering eggs from the chicken coop, gulping down the yolk until she threw up. A booming male voice laughed cruelly. "That's what you get for being greedy, you little twit." He grabbed her by the neck and rubbed her face in the vomit, kicked her in the side and left her laying there, and I woke up. I'm not sure why she came to our house and why she hasn't come back since. I simply wish there was something I could have done to help her. Who knows, maybe she will come back. I just hope one day somehow she can find peace. Back in the early 1990s, my primary school in Benoni, God Province, like virtually every other school out there, had its fair share of ghost stories. Nothing really stuck around for more than 6 months, however, since older stories would be changed considerably or replaced by something brand new by kids with vivid, if at times completely silly, imaginations. The story I am about to relate to you here does not align with any of these stories, however. In the early 80s, our school decided to expand due to a larger number of students, and built a few more classrooms, and during this time several prefab rooms were also assembled as temporary classrooms. Once the permanent classrooms were ready for use, the school kept the prefabs as storage rooms, where old broken desks, chairs and the like were stored. Others were used for the music room, a science lab and a wood workshop. The actual event happened in 1992. It was my last year of primary school, and we were taking part in a school play on a Friday night. My friend, Charles, myself and 3 other students were finished with our scenes in the play, but couldn't go home yet since all of us were obligated to stay until it was finished. We had changed out of our costumes and decided to walk around the school grounds and chat until we could go home. We were walking, chatting and joking around as kids tend to do, crossing the sports field towards some of the prefab buildings at the back of the school grounds. We came to a stop in front of one of the storage units, chatting about a television series we missed due to the play. I was slightly distracted by the strange clutter in the one window of this unit, though. Several old desks and chairs were haphazardly stacked up against the dusty, grimy window, along with some old textbooks. I couldn't recall ever seeing this clutter before, but eventually brushed it off, thinking that someone might have moved stuff around to use some of the things stored in there as props for the play. I turned my back on the window and rejoined the conversation, Charles standing beside me, also facing away from the window. The boy in front of me was in the middle of a sentence when he abruptly stopped talking. His face drained of all color, and he had a look of sheer terror. He was staring at something behind me. I apprehensively turned around, looking towards the window. At first it didn't register what I was looking at exactly. Then it became all too clear. Pressed up against the window was a grotesque, bloated, yellowish face. Its eyes were swollen shut and its mouth was slightly open. It felt like my heart jumped into my throat. Then I chuckled, thinking that it was just a mask left in the window that I hadn't noticed before. Then it opened its mouth wide. This was no mask. We got out of there as quickly as our legs could carry us. I can safely say I was screaming like a 5-year-old girl as we were running, but luckily I was not the only one. We nearly gave our poor music teacher a heart attack as we almost barreled into her in the dark of the sports field, but to be fair, she scared the heck out of us as well. She had been on her way to the music room to fetch something when she heard our screams, and came to investigate. She demanded to know what was going on. We all started talking at once, but eventually got the message through to her that we had seen a face in the window. She told us to take her to the prefab building and show her, even though she also looked pretty frightened at that moment. We reluctantly approached the building with our teacher in tow, but found that things were not as we remembered them. The clutter in the window was gone, there were no smudges on the inside of the window, and there definitely was no yellow face in the window either. Our teacher was extremely mad at us, and actually burst into tears, scolding us for playing such a mean trick on her. She said that we would definitely get quite the talking to on Monday when we were back at school, and she stormed off. We were all in quite a state at that point. Not only had we been scared out of our wits, but also got into trouble with a teacher. We hurried towards the classrooms where the other students were gathered, and none of us spoke about it further that night. On Monday we didn't get the stern talking to that we dreaded, luckily. During recess I spoke to Charles and one of the other boys about what happened that night. Charles had actually not seen what the rest of us had seen and only got spooked because we got spooked. By the end of the school day the story had somehow spread, starting new school legends about the ghost in the prefab, each backstory more ridiculous than the previous one. Many times I have wondered if this was just a very elaborate prank, but if it was, the pranksters had some skills worthy of scare tactics. Firstly, the door was securely padlocked, and the music teacher was the only one who had the keys for those units that night. Secondly, the face was in an area where no person in a mask could possibly be, since the clutter in the window was far too tightly packed to allow anyone to crawl into such a small space without any of us hearing or noticing it. Thirdly, said pranksters only had about 3 to 4 minutes to remove the clutter, pack everything back in its place, and get away before we returned with the teacher. All I can say is that it was not a fun experience, prank or not. This is an incident that both my cousin whom I'll call in and I experienced one night. We both worked for the same company and same shop, one of the leading fresh produce franchises in South Africa. Since we both worked together and would always come over and stay at my place and we would travel by bus to and from work. One such evening we had finished work and headed home, we got onto the bus and took a seat behind a lady, so we were talking about the day and also checking our phones and catching up with our social media friends. We were nearing our stop. Ironically ours was the last stop, when suddenly Ian nudges me and tells me to look at the reflection on the bus glass of the lady sitting in front of us. He looked clearly freaked out. The reflection of the lady on the glass was not what she looked like in person. I remember clearly she was fair in complexion and had straight brown hair. The reflection on the glass had blonde hair that was braided and her complexion was darker. Not to mention she had a weird-looking face. Like a zombie or something unearthly. Thankfully we had to jump out and we both ran out as fast as we could and did not stop to look back at what it was. This is something that Ian and I always bring up. Right until this day we cannot find a valid explanation as to who or what that thing was. We both had witnessed it, and also the bus was well lit. There was no way two of us could have been hallucinating at the same time. For all we know, it could have been a ghost or a spirit, and we had sat directly behind it. I have written some of the resident spirit in my home. It's a friendly one, and has quieted down a bit since my last cleansing. We have an understanding, I suppose. But as of lately, I have noticed in quite a few incidents, that this one tends to warn me of things to come. On one occasion, during the flu and head and chest cold outbreak in my children's schools, with no sign of them being remotely sick, the activity starting up. From the sound and vibration of my downstairs patio door sliding open, never did it actually open. I can feel the vibration of it opening and closing because my bedroom is right above the dining room, which leads out to the back patio. Then hearing those all too familiar footsteps walking the length of the hallway and into my bedroom, across the floor at the end of my bed, and suddenly stop. Hearing the same footsteps, going down my staircase, hearing the voices whispering, and again seeing the ever-fleeting shadow in my room, and all around the house. When I noticed the activity, I hadn't yet figured out why it suddenly became more active. Then within that same week, one by one my kids started to come down with the flu. One would get better, then the next one would get sick, ending up in major bleaching and cleaning of the home. Sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. So I wrote it all down, and put the activity journal away. Didn't think any more of it. 2 months ago, I had this feeling of dread, and it wouldn't go away. I just kept feeling it. So I warned my husband to be careful while driving, etc., etc. I honestly didn't know where it was coming from. I was on caution all of the time, while taking my pup out, to use the bathroom, to watching and walking my kids to the bus stops in the mornings, to making sure all the locks on windows and doors were locked at night. Then for whatever reason, I started thinking of his cousin. Now we hadn't really spoken to him in a while, but memories kept popping in. His face, his house continued to creep into my thoughts. One Saturday evening, after his cousin had attended a funeral, he had headed home, and made it there, but then decided to leave in his car. My husband and I decided to grab a bite to eat after I finally got off work. We got home, and we started talking about this particular cousin out of nowhere. I had this sinking yet calm feeling in the pit of my stomach. Interrupting our conversation, he gets a call from his uncle. He answers it, and the news he got was extremely saddening and unexpected. His cousin had been shot and was at the hospital. I instantly got chills over in my chest area, and pictures like a movie, of it happening. I told my husband he's been shot in his chest, and he's not going to live. He said, yeah, I don't know yet, they don't know where he's been shot at or what happened. The next evening, after many calls, texts, and updates on social media, his cousin was pronounced dead. His uncle was at the hospital, my husband just couldn't go up there. And he called to let him know he had been shot in his chest by a neighbor. The week before all of this took place, activity started to happen. My T.V. would switch channels, to something that had to do with that particular city, in which his cousin lived, thus causing some memories to pop in. And now for the last set of activities I will write in here. Activity started up 2 weeks ago. Footsteps, patio door sounds and vibrations, and what sounded like my puppy's footsteps running into my room and around my bed. I immediately sit up and look around, no sight of him. So I get up thinking maybe he had run into one of the other 2 bedrooms. Finding nothing, I head downstairs. I walk into the dining room to find him fast asleep, snoring. At one point while laying in bed, I heard a voice shout my name. I opened my eyes, looked around, hubby fast asleep, and all is still pitch black, no lights to indicate the kids were up, and no, they don't call me by my name. But I had to investigate. I couldn't lay back down not knowing all was secure. Again found nothing. Then for the last part, which led up to the warning, I felt someone poke my shoulder while laying down, felt like one finger poke me. Felt my cover being pulled down over my feet 3 times before I asked it to stop. Then what sounded like my little T.V. being moved ever so slightly on my stand a couple of times. The next morning, I started to feel nauseous and my stomach started to cramp a bit. Not sure where it came from, just as soon as it started it ended as well. So I went about my day. The next morning, I discovered my poor pup covered in his own watery feces and vomit. From being stuck in his cage at night, and coming down with a serious stomach virus. We took him to the vet, and they gave us instructions to keep him hydrated with a few options. Over the past week I have been nursing him back to his good health, and I'm so happy to say he's back to his normal self.
I really love to listen to any creepy ghost stories ever since I was young, and perhaps my fascination over those kind of things awakened my paranormal senses. Disclaimer: 1. Most of the names I will write are just made up to protect the real identity of my closest friends. 2. Most dialogues will be written in Taglish or non-verbatim to emphasize the real situation happened. Any rough translations will be provided accordingly. Thank you. My cousin from the US went home and stayed in our house for 2 weeks. She chose to occupy our guest room located at the 3rd floor. This was my room for almost 3 years until I decided to leave the room since there's some kind of entity that doesn't like me there. Think about the stuff that could possibly happen. Countless sleepless nights, that feeling of someone staring at you while you sleep, voices at the corridor, moving things and dragging chairs, etc. I can enumerate everything, but I will just tell them on the next following chapters. Moving forward to the story, ever since I left the room, no one has ever occupied it for such a long time except if there are any family members that will come and visit. The room is quite too big, but the ambience is light since the windows and veranda are usually open. But when the dusk starts to bite the sky, the feel inside the room gradually change as well. Right after our dinner, she decided to stay in her room and told me that she's going to have a nice chit-chat with her friend living in Singapore. I told her to turn the lights on if she wanted to have a video call because the room isn't really well lighted since my dad don't have much time to change all the light bulbs. Okay lang, smahagadan lang naman madilim diba? It's fine, the stairs are the only side that's dark, right? I didn't know what happened after. I did not even bother to check her room as I let her rest and enjoy her night. It was past 11 a.m. when she woke up the next day and told the incident from last night. Sam, diba? Sam, isn't that your room before? Oh 8. Back at Po? Yes, why? Walalang, kazi diba, ang kasna nayan sa 3rd floor na kaya impossibly makita yung kapit bahay no? Nothing, it's just that. It's located at the 3rd floor, so it's impossible to see the reflections from the neighborhood, right? 8 naman, ang leo kaya engine gabahay drito. Ano ba nangyari? Sis, the distance of each houses are blocks away. Why? What happened? Kasi, yung friend ko, tunitanan na akong sino kasama ko ay sabi ko wala naman, iko lang nag-isa. Sabi pa na ling, hindi. May katabi ka na katinjan gas akin lolo mo ba? My friend was asking me if someone's with me and I told her I'm alone, but she insisted as the old lady was actually staring at her. She thought she was my grandmother. Then she added, Iko na hinanon kanganon at sure kazidit to kana ko perona zabi na matan dang babi na mahaba ang bak tapos na kapuri. Na kaniti dasakanya tapos hinahiplos haplos unaloko. Nako yun ko bakang niloloko langako na napuro kinikalabit niko a. I didn't dare to ask how does she looked like because I feel scared, but she mentioned that the old lady was wearing a very long hair and she was smiling as she caressed my head. I don't know if she's just joking, but it gave me goosebumps all over. As much as I wanted to tell her more, I never initiated any related stories after knowing her creepy story from my previous room. She might end up sleeping in my room instead. As if she'll have a nice sleep. Well, at least it gave me a confirmation that there is really someone who's with us in the room 24/7.
These weird things have been happening since my mom and dad moved to Kentucky, and it just got weirder when I moved in with them. I seriously don't know what is going on, and I sincerely hope it is not something dangerous. Whenever I at least lay down or sit alone, something wraps their arms around me. I get so confused and scared and I do not know why it is happening. I do go to church and I am young, so I go to CCD. I want this to stop, but for some reason, I don't. I have been studying some things in order to find out what it is, but so far I cannot find anything. This is so weird, but I feel it comforting, and since I have some issues with myself, I always feel it when either cry, or not. A few days ago, I woke up to a weird position. My shirt was up, exposing some parts, my hands looked like they were being pinned, and my blanket was down. I also woke up a few months ago to something touching me. It disappeared when I woke up. I cannot communicate with this thing at all, but I am not really sure what it is. As of right now, as I am writing, something is hugging me from behind, and yet I can feel something around my waist and maybe patting my head or kissing my neck. I can't really tell what it is, but I am hoping this thing would stop because it feels awkward to have something holding me but I can't see it. This is really weird for me. I have not only been experiencing this at home, but at school too. When I was walking in the hallway, I passed the trophy case in my school and I saw something behind me. When I turned back, there was nothing at all. I also wake up to scratches on me. This is a true story. It happened at one of my friend's sleepovers. After my friends and I were done talking about the regular things girls would talk about at sleepovers, we decided to do something scary. I knew that my friend, Hannah, was trying to be brave, as paranormal stuff isn't really her thing. There was me, Tashina, Hannah, Rihanna, Alana, and Autumn doing the Bloody Mary. We all decided to do it together, because we searched up stories about Bloody Mary and some of them didn't end up good. It was around 12 that night and soon we finally had the guts to do it. We scavenged her house for candles and we found one in the kitchen. We made our way into the bathroom, closing the door and turning off the lights. We repeated all together. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. After about 2 minutes, nothing happened. Then, we got bored, so we turned to the door. We heard a voice. "My sweeties, you can't leave me." I turned around and saw a woman, white dress and long black hair. She had blood all over her dress. She began walking towards us. You might be like, how can she walk to you? Isn't bathroom small? Well, Autumn's bathroom was huge. She smiled evilly and began reaching out to Tashina. Tashina screamed and hit her with a toothbrush. I immediately turned the knob and ran out the door, my friends following. We never, and I mean never, talked about that day ever again. It still haunts me to this day knowing we summoned up a spirit that could have possibly killed us. So to give you some backstory, I'm 13 years old and I live in Cairns, Australia. The place that I live was originally built over old sugar cane farm. So I moved into this house about 4 years ago now, and the house was about 4 years old when we bought it. About a year after we moved in, strange things began to happen. Objects would disappear from their original places, creepy noises in the walls. This was your typical cliché ghost, but then it started to get worse. At 3 a.m., the witching hour, I would constantly hear scraping in the wall as if someone was scraping the inside of the wall with a rake. Then in late autumn just after my birthday I woke up. I was sweating severely, so I suspected that the power was out. As I hopped out of bed I felt something. A hand. It was soft but it felt strange. I instantly flipped out and tried to get away. The thing had a very weak grip, so I managed to scurry to my brother's room. As I explained what happened to him, of course he didn't believe me. He just told me that it was a bad dream, and that I should just go back to sleep. I knew this wasn't a dream though. It was real. I headed to my mother's room to tell her that the power had gone out. When I went in, there was a figure. It was a tall yellowish figure with just a hint of black. When I took another step it turned around. It stared. It started with big giant eyes but only with the white. As I glimpsed at it before I got the hell out of there, I could see it was dressed in old 1900s farming clothing. As I ran back to my room the power had just come back on. I was extremely glad, but I still didn't want to go into my room or my mum's room. So I slept on the floor in my brother's room. I have no idea what grabbed me that night, or if it's coming back for me. I have no clue. It has since been 10 months since this account. I think the ghost or whatever it was is gone, and I hope that it never comes back. Thank you for reading. This is my first time writing my story, so please bear with me. I have experienced a lot of ghostly encounter, but this story is the first time I saw one, and it is unforgettable. My family were living in a semi-exclusive subdivision in ZINZZZIN, Cavite for more than 18 years before we moved to our new home last December. The new house is located quite near to the old one. This encounter happened when I was 13-14 years old. I'm 23 years old now and the eldest child, at our old house. For you to visualize the setting, here is the layout. The house is a quadruplex and bungalow type for the whole street of houses, like a big square but divided to 4 units, so it is basically for 4 family unless you will purchase the whole lot. We use the unit beside our house as a stock room for unused things or appliances for repair. It doesn't have doors and jalousies. It was stolen by some kids, so we make one for safekeeping of our things inside, but later on, we remove everything that's inside it when someone finally bought it. At the front, we planted calamansi tree, breadnut tree. So we are the only family living in that quadruplex for about 10 years, though we have other neighbors within our street, and night lights were only at the front of our houses. One night around 7 p.m., I was throwing out the garbage. I saw a vague light from inside the empty house, light that is almost near the roof. It was totally dark there, so I ignored it, thinking that it was from other houses' front light. Months passed and I forgot it completely when I saw something creepy. A lady in white nightgown, floating at the middle of the house for about 7-10 inches off the ground and near the front door. She was facing me, though I can't see her face. I can see how her hair flowing as if there's a fan in front of her. I stood there for a few seconds, and when I realized what in hell was that, I ran back to my house screaming. My mom asked why, but I didn't said anything, for they might not believe it. I made sure that I will throw our garbage early and won't stay outside when the clock strikes 6 p.m. so that I can't see that again. Few days after, my mom asked me to buy something to the nearby store, but I refused. She said she can't leave her cooking, so I have no choice but to do as she says. I have to walk in front of the empty house to get to the store. I also put a bath towel on my head so that I can't see the house. But things got weird when I am passing the house and something was forcing me to look at it. And there she was again, looking through the window. As if she was waiting for me. I still can't see her face. I can't run back to my house, so I ran to the store sobbing, but bought what I need and stayed there for a while and went home. I have to pass again at that creepy house to get to ours. I was hesitant to walk again, but I don't want to stay long outside, so I ran. While running, I also caught a shadow of a man standing beside the other empty house. I screamed while running. Luckily, my mom was now outside with a neighbor and waiting for me. She asked what took me so long and told her everything, even the light I first saw. My neighbor asked me if I can accompany him to where it all began, and I agreed. I was shaking as the three of us walked to the empty house. I pointed to them where I first saw the light, and when they analyze it, it's impossible to enter any light that high. Then I stand to where I saw her floating and our neighbor stiffened. My mom asked why, but he said we should get out of there immediately. He told us that he felt a presence and had goosebumps. I went silent and I don't know what came into me, but I stared at him. After a while, I stood up like nothing happened and continued my chores. The next day, they told me that for a while, they felt that when I was silent, it's not me they are with, and he even told me that I was smirking and glaring at him like I want him dead. I said I know that I was staring at him but not aware with the glare and smirk thing. They brought me to a quack doctor and he said the lady I was seeing was living in the calamansi tree, breadnut tree. The lady don't want to harm me but wanted to be my friend. He said I just need to light a candle beside the tree for her to spare me. And I did. I can't bear to have an unseen friend that time. Until the last time I went to the old house, I didn't see the lady nor feel her presence. Maybe she found another friend. And that's fine. Thank you for reading. Better cross to the other side of the street. Don't let your son play with that kid. Better wear runners today. For as long as I can remember, every so often some ideas pop up in my head for no apparent motive and without any personal effort. They are almost like a voice speaking nonsense in my brain. Sometimes I try to reason against it or simply ignore it, only to find out that the stranger walking the street on my direction was a dollar and groper, or the cute 3-year-old my son was trying to befriend was nothing but a spoiled brat, or that September 19, 1985, when I had to walk for almost 4 hours through the streets of Mexico City after the public transport was disrupted due to a strong earthquake. Fortunately that day I listened to the voice and decided against wearing high heels. Before getting married, I used to live with my family in a working-class neighborhood consisting of 6 blocks arranged in 2 rows of 3 blocks, and situated between a subdivision of apartment buildings and a tall brick wall running all the length of the 3 blocks. The wall was the last remnant of an old foundry that was relocated when the city began to grow. My house was in a corner across from the wall, which was used like an improvised fronton, handball, court by the youth of the area who would spend long hours playing in the street, paying no heed to the local traffic nor to the pedestrians walking by, but since people knew each other there was no major conflict. With time, the fame of the wall attracted many other young men of dubious reputation, and with their arrival came all sorts of problems. Alcohol and drugs found their way into the court. They formed little gangs that didn't mind harassing the locals. Due to the location of my house, it was common for some of the balls to land on the roof. Sometimes the guys would ask for permission to climb to the roof to get their ball. If nobody was home, some of them would just leave, but some others would just get to the roof and retrieve the balls without caring that they were trespassing private property. One day I came home just to find one of the worst of these men on the roof of my house. When he got down I told him that what he had done was wrong. Of course he wouldn't take to being told off by a girl in front of his cronies and began insulting and threatening me. I was angry and afraid. I knew he was a gangster that wouldn't think twice to harm me or my family. My legs were shaking, but I stood my ground and told him to go fly a kite. We engaged in a short exchange of insults and cuss words. I stopped talking when the voice said in my head, "No te preocupes, lo van a matar en la calle, do not worry, he will get killed in the street." The shock of this thought made me walk away, trying to understand what just had happened. A short time later, perhaps a month to 6 weeks after this incident, the young man had an encounter with a rival gang while leaving a little convenience store in the turf of his enemies. They killed him by smashing his head with the heavy cement lid of a manhole. Hearing the news was upsetting. At some point I blamed myself for thinking about him getting killed, but after reviewing what happened during our brief encounter I came to realize that I never wished for his death and that the voice had only warned me of something that would happen, just like it has been doing for so many times in my life. I know he was a gangster, but I felt and still feel sorry for the way he died. Thanks for reading my experience. In late 2006 I finished my time in the U.S. Army. I was young and wanted to enjoy my newly found outlook on life outside the military. This new outlook was indicative of me enjoying some family time. This was family time that I had not had in years. So I moved back to Massachusetts to be closer to them. My mother suggested that I move in with her until I had a stable job and reserved income to stay ahead. I was opposed to it at first until she told me that the 3rd floor was done over and would be perfect. In October of 2006 I moved in. My brother and sister also lived on the 3rd floor, but that was not a bother for me. I had been in the house only one other time before that. It was when my mom was moving in. I always felt weird in there but never thought anything of it. Now I am full on living in this house, and everything feels slightly off. The first incident was in early November. I was shaving my face. I do not know what happened, but I lost about an hour of time. It was long enough for the shaving cream to start to break down. I did not realize how long I had been in the bathroom performing this activity until I had got out. My brother scowls at me and says, "An hour? I thought you guys in the army were supposed to be quick." I laughed at first until I looked at the clock to see that it had been almost an hour. I thought it to be strange but did not think too hard on it. I was a very skeptical person at this point in my life. My second incident began about 3 nights later. It was about 10:30 p.m. I was in the bathroom and I could hear what sounded like footsteps. I peered under the door the best I could to see who it was. All I could see what appeared to me to be as 2 shadows of what I had to assume were legs. I blasted the door open quickly. I had to open it quickly, because no one was supposed to be home for about 3 more hours. I was now officially worried that someone was intruding in my mom's house. I was still skeptical enough to assume it was a person. Whom else would it be? I was quick enough to grab my bat, and I began systematically clearing every room. No one was to be found and all the doors were still locked. I chalked it up to nerves, and the house being old. Most of all, I felt that I was just genuinely being paranoid. I was still trying to get my bearings on being a civilian, so I was a tad bit weary all the time. The next day I am on the 2nd floor. That is where the main kitchen, dining room, living room, main bathroom, and main bedroom was. My mom is gathering my brother and sister's clothes up. She is walking up the stairs and my brother and I hear a huge slam. She comes down the stairs saying "F King Carl," as she comes into the dining room. My brother is looking right at her and she drops her basket. Carl goes, "Why were you swearing about me for?" My mom tells us that when she got upstairs right to Carl's door, the door slammed hard in her face. I, being the only rational one, asked if the window was open. My mom said that she did not know, so I went up to investigate. With my brother in tow we ascended the staircase. My brother's room was at the top of the steps. I opened the door expecting to see an open window, but it was shut tight and locked. Being that it was November now in Massachusetts, of course it would be shut. I was still the one saying it could have just been a draft, and that we should just let it go instead of speculating. So every day leading up to our first major event was plagued by shadows, knocks, and footsteps. I still try to brush it off as just mere coincidence and old house. It is now the 2nd week of December. It is about 3 a.m. I wake to hear my brother shouting no, and that he cannot and will not stay here anymore. I run in to see if everything was okay, and he tells me emphatically no, nothing is okay. I walk him outside helping him with his bags. He just grabbed the things he could see, and nothing more. We are outside the house and I ask him again what happened. He looks at me and says that I wouldn't believe him. I told him to try me. He agrees and begins to tell me what happened. He details hearing a rustling sound that woke him. He thought it was our dog Simba, so he tells me that he rolled over to tell her to get out. He said that when he rolled over he saw what looked like a naked person run real fast through the wall. He said that startled him, but what came next is what scared him out of the house. He said it looked like the person who ran was being chased by something. He described it as being grotesque, gruesome, and he said it was crab walking through the same area of the wall. He said it was like something out of a horror movie. I asked him if it was possibly sleep paralysis. He said it couldn't be, because he shot up out of bed when he saw the person, and he got the full effect of the monster that was behind him. My brother never stepped back into the house after that night. He said to me that he could never go back in, and that the house scarred him. A week passes and we spend Christmas at my aunt's house, because of this incident. A couple days after Christmas, my mom and I are watching TV. We are watching a show. It is about 11:30 or so a.m. Something draws my attention. I look at the doorway to see what looks to me like a person wearing a giant hat and cloak. This person at the time blocks out the sun, and takes up most of the doorway with its height and stature. I look away for a moment and it is gone. My mom reacts immediately to ask me if I saw that as well. I said I did, and I grabbed her pistol, and asked her to lock her doors while I searched the house. I run through every floor and every door. All the doors to get in and out of the house are still locked and dead-bolted. I come up with nothing and no solution or answer to what we just saw. I come back and ask my mom to draw what she saw, and so do I. We compare the drawings and they are almost identical. I am now officially scared. My mom and I go to the dining room and start asking each other a question or two about it. Like for instance its size or any distinguishable features. We write it all down. We compare the answers and all our answers match. I am scared, but also have to be tough or get bullied by whatever it was. For the days leading up to my final encounter, the house felt like it wanted me out. The house now to me felt like it was alive in a sense. With the constant footsteps, shadows and knocking almost all hours of the day, it was enough to drive you mad. One night I am laying down to go to bed. My bedroom was right outside a street light. This light had lit my room up pretty well for the most part. I am laying on my side facing my window. As I lay there I begin to hear what sounds like faint whispers. While the whispers are going on I start to see the light from the street light start to retreat out of my room. As it got closer to the window the whispers got louder. When the light finally made it to my windowsill I heard "Let's get him" right in my ear. I sat up and yelled at whatever to get out of my room. When I said that I heard a loud crash from within my room. I jumped fully out of the bed and turned on the lights. I look around to find a softball-size hole in my wall, about 6 to 7 inches above where my cable box was. I went into work the next morning and put in my 2 weeks. I have only been inside that house one other time since that incident. That was about 3 months after it, because my mom had sold it on a short sale and she was moving out. I have driven by the house on occasion visiting my mom. Just trying to look at it gives me anxiety. Good luck to anyone whom tries to investigate it. I do not know who owns it. The house has changed hands 2 times since my mom. Also as a bonus, when I left my mom got new carpets put in all the rooms. She told me years later that when they pulled my carpet up they found a door it had hundreds of nails in it. She said it looked ominous. The house in this story is real and the events are accurate. Greetings. I lived in a village, which was near Adilabad district. This experience still is fresh in my mind. It gives me shiver. It may not be so scary for you all, but it is according to me. It date back to 2011. I forgot the exact date. So, it was a normal day. It was summer. We all sleep together. We had 2 large bedroom, a kitchen, and a guest room. We had a backyard which consists of bathroom and rest room. So, first let me describe of my room where we were sleeping. It was room with 1 single and 1 double bed. On double bed me, my dad and mom were sleeping, and on the single bed my brother was sleeping. So, we had a round table behind my bed. I clearly remember the time. It was exact 2 a.m. I was still not asleep. I had a very bad habit of being awake at night. That's why I was called as Night Princess by my whole family. I felt thirsty. Water jug was behind my bed. I looked at the jug. Suddenly I saw 2 eyes bright, shining in pitch darkness. I was scared. Then I stared at thinking my hallucinating, but when I concentrating I saw a human figure. I started shivering. Let me describe him. He was a skinny person whose whole body was grayish. He had big dirty curly hairs. I was still staring unbelievably. Then I fainted. I woke up at morning. I was still shivering. My mom saw me and came near me. I narrated everything. I expected she won't believe me. But when I heard her I was shocked. She said yes, I too saw him. We had a ritual at home. We called him Maulana. He helped us getting rid of him. But he said it was the effect of black magic. Sometimes I still see him somewhere. In a fraction of seconds he'd disappear. I need your help to get rid. Please do comment. Thanks for reading. I guess the thing you need to know for this particular event to make sense, is in that long ago when the doctors gave my mother 3 months to live, 2 things happened simultaneously. She made up her mind to make them out to be liars, and she became very obsessed with her songs. Referring to them as her songs did not mean she wrote them, or had any legal claim. They were just songs you never heard anyone else sing anymore, since many predated radio even. Some were jaunty little ditties, others were ballads, and some were plain silly but fun to sing, and some almost operatic. Most were in English, but a few were Gaelic. As she grew weaker, she became convinced that with her passing, the songs, would die too, as no one would remember them, even though us kids had heard them our entire lives. I'm one of 8 kids, Why she decided I was the one that had to learn them all, is beyond me. The others were quite musical, as were our parents. They all had that gift that brings life into music so that it transcends being just notes and rhythm. My 3 sisters were all sopranos, like my mother, and 3 of the boys tenors. My oldest brother had real range though, he could either hit notes that belonged in the basement, or soar as high as any soprano. Me? Well, I was at best a low alto, who paled so much by comparison I may as well have sung in the key of Z. Still, it was me Mom wanted to teach them too, and if that's what she wanted that's what was going to happen, and so I sung. On days Mom felt up to it we had duets, and if it was a really good day, she'd accompany us on the piano. On bad days, when there was just too much pain, she'd have me sit by her bed and sing, telling me when I missed a note, or didn't get a word exactly right. It was also very important to her, which made it important to me. My mother made it past the 3 months, and although she never got better, she simply refused to let go just yet, or to let me stop singing. Even after I left home at 16, and would manage to call her from a payphone, she'd ask me to sing her this song or that. Funny thing about that, there I'd be standing there using a wall-mounted payphone, one without a booth, singing to her, usually with tears creeping down my cheeks, and almost without fail someone would tip me. Never a lot, but a coin or 2 that would let me talk a few minutes more. Poor Mama in those pre-caller ID days had no clue her little girl was living on the streets. She thought I was living with a friend. A lie spun by my father that I allowed to stand. Sometimes lies need to be. But enough on that. Mama passed in 1986, by then I was married with a son and another baby on the way. I wasn't even showing yet. I had managed to forge an uneasy alliance with my father over the decades, just so I could see my mom in the last years of her life, and whenever we would visit, that woman would have me sing a song or 2, her pick. I always felt a bit like I was taking a pop quiz. But no one was more shocked than I when at her funeral my dad asked me to sing for her one last time, as he always referred to my attempts as necessary noise that made my mother happy. I sang Maiden Imbira, O Danny Boy in Gaelic, the way she had taught me to, not out of fear that it would be forgotten, but because it was my father's favorite song, and when they were courting, she had learned the Irish words as a surprise for him. He only sang it in English, unable to roll his R's or affect a brogue, but, as her illness took hold, she could no longer sustain the notes, and so it had been a very long time since it had been heard in the family. She had thought that perhaps, after she had gone, it might be a reminder for my father that he had and always would be loved by her, if I would just sing it once in a while when around him. When he asked, I thought I heard my mom tell me to sing the song. I'd almost swear I did. Perhaps a trick of the wind, or my emotions playing up, accented by the other's grief. I began to sing, and I closed my eyes, as everyone began to stare at me. I could hear my mother's high, clear soprano, as it was before the illness, encouraging my voice to soar with hers, rounding out the notes I could never quite reach before. When I finished, those who were staring before, were murmuring, whispering to each other, "Did you see that?" Or "My God, she sounded like her mother." My father just would not stop staring at me or in my direction. At the reception I finally worked up my nerve and asked my oldest sisters, the twins, "See what?" I've no explanation for their answer, but they swore they saw Mama standing next to me, singing right along. I live in Cheshire, England, UK with my parents. I'm a teenage girl who loves many things, one of them being ghost stories and ghost hunting. It has been a long time since I posted a story, but I wanted to share an experience that happened to me and my mum the other day. We were in our neighboring town, shopping for some general stuff that we needed. After we had gotten everything, we decided that we wanted to go to the town library. The library is really old. I can't tell you how old exactly, but it's been there for a good 100 years at least. It has got a lot of history. We had no real reason to go there, we only wanted to go because we knew that our favorite library staff were on duty that day, and we wanted to drop by for a chat. Side note, these library staff know that me and my mum love the paranormal, and they always love to catch up with us to see any new ghostly evidence we have, or any new scary experiences that have happened to us. Considering this fact, we were very eager to go to the library. Not only to talk about ghosts, but just to see our friends. So, we pull up to the library around 2 p.m., and we parked around the back. The back of the library has a small set of steps that lead up to a back door entrance, but it is never used. It has been years since that door has been opened. Even the staff use the front entrance to get in and out. We could see the steps to the back door as we got out of the car. My mum was in front of me as I was lagging behind, being the smaller one. We were walking to the front entrance, so we had to pass the back stairs to get there. As we were coming up to the bottom of the back stairs, we saw a lady coming in the opposite direction. She had short white hair, a black coat, and was carrying a black bag in her left hand. The lady reached the bottom of the stairs and began to climb them just as I walked past. My first thought was, oh, she's just going to use that door instead, and I brushed it off. About 2 seconds later I realized, what on earth was she doing? Nobody uses that door, ever. How was she expecting to get in? I turned around to face the stairs again to see how this would play out, but when I turned, she wasn't there anymore. I stood, staring in awe for approximately 10 seconds, until my mum realized I had stopped walking. She turned and asked what I was looking at, and I only managed to utter the words, "Did you just see that?" before my mum finished the sentence for me. She'd seen the same lady, apart from she hadn't seen her start to climb the stairs because she was in front of me. My mum had brushed it off like I had, until I'd stopped and thought about it. At this point we were both staring at the back door, wondering where on earth this woman could have gone had she been real. Even if she had somehow opened that door, she couldn't have done it that quickly. There was only a 2-second gap for her to do it before I had it turned around, and even with the time she still couldn't have reached the top of the stairs. Plus, the door huge, it's a double door that's really big and heavy, and has 2 locks on it. So, there was no way she'd gone through that door. I ran down the street to see if the lady had changed her mind and carried on walking, but she was nowhere to be seen. At this point me and my mum are in disbelief. We had just seen a lady who then practically evaporated into thin air. I didn't even have to describe the lady to my mum, she told me her appearance perfectly. I knew from this she couldn't have copied me, as I'd said barely anything. We ran round to the front door of the library and burst in like a pair of excited children. We didn't even say hello to our favorite staff, we just jumped right into conversation with them about what had just happened. They found it super weird and they were intrigued. They confirmed the back door was never used and there were not any more staff members scheduled for that day anyway. Needless to say that our staff friends were very excited about the encounter, but they then refused to walk into the back of the library where the other side of that door was for the rest of the day. On another note, the back of the library is for staff members only. A majority of staff have reported that there are strange goings-on in that area, like footsteps and things going missing, only to appear back in the place that it was thought they originally were. After discussing the incident right there, not me, my mum or any of the staff could explain what had happened. We were just very excited at the fact that me and my mum had literally seen a ghost, and we wanted it to happen again. After we finally left the library we walked back to that back door to get to our car. We did do a small investigation which involved taking some pictures to see if anything spooky showed up, but we haven't analyzed the images yet. Overall I'd say I'm quite confused as to why a ghost would show itself to me and my mum at 2 in the afternoon, but I feel very privileged that it decided to. I grew up in York County, Virginia, less than a mile from where part of the Revolutionary War was fought. The whole area has different stories about them. The older generation in my family is not religious but very superstitious, so they told us stories about people seeing things at different times of day and night. And how some people have vanished without a trace, or something made them resort to drug and alcohol abuse. I love a good story, so I always paid attention. I was 19 I think, and some of my college classmates had heard different stories from the area and joked about them. So I told them I could prove it. Just didn't know how right then. My grandma, then my mom, aunts, uncles and older cousin, used to tell us, exactly how they word it, you don't F with the dead. At all. One fall night I was bored and the cool air made me want to do something outside. So I got my classmates together and decided to give them a ghost tour. At the time I lived with my uncle, my mom's youngest brother. He was very protective of me. He asked where I was going, being it already dark, late and cold. I told him I was going to go scare the shit out of my classmates. He reminded me of the warnings beat in my head by the elders of the family. I didn't listen. Of course, we all met up and got into my Jeep. The first stop was my other uncle's grave. I was named after him except for the middle initial. They didn't know that, and his middle initial was not on his gravestone. As I walked them back to it, there were no street lights at all. Told them some BS about how some people don't know they're dead. The only light was my huge flashlight gun looking thing. When we get to it I show them the grave, I shine the light on it and there it was our name, my uncle and mine, and one of them freaks out and runs off into the darkness. We retrieved him, of course. I had a good laugh, but I had one more place to show them. These were the actual trenches the colonists fought in during the Battle of Yorktown. The elders told us never to go there day or night. I never went there cause my mom would kick my ass if she found out I went, no matter how old I was. We're walking out there, like I said, no street lights at all whatsoever, not even moonlight. But I had my handy flashlight gun, but then we noticed two large black silhouettes. I assumed they were deer, so I pointed the light at them. The light beam, I know sounds like DBZ, went right through. So one of the guys in our group was about to walk over and try to scare them off. It was then I noticed they were on two legs and was charging straight at us. I was like F this and started booking back to the car. My classmates followed me and the shadows were picking up speed. Even though they were running, I guess, their movement made no sound at all. So the Jeep is like another few feet away, so yelled, if you trip your F-ed, I'm not coming back for you. I'm a coward, I know. The brave usually gets killed in the movies. The shadows were still advancing, but thank God we all got in the car together. I was screaming, they were screaming, and couldn't hear the beeps that would allow me to start the engine. Finally, somehow I got it going and I peeled off. The crazy part was the shadows stopped right there at the road and I had parked on the other side of the road. It was like they were telling us what we were doing was disturbing and disrespectful to them. I know now why the elders tells us these stories. I thought of tell our kids those stories, but we live far away from there. I may save them for a dark and stormy night. Word of advice: don't take historic sites as a joke. This literally just happened and I made an account to post it. I was at my old primary school and I thought I was the only one there. After a couple of minutes of chilling out, I see a boy walk past on the other side of the playground. He's about my age and wearing a dark blue hoodie and tan jeans, and he moves to walk around the corner. I go to follow him and I turn the corner, but he has literally disappeared. I obviously am scared and confused, and spend about 2 minutes standing there shaking. I'm advancing forward, wondering if I was just slow to follow and if this kid was smoking weed somewhere. So I start checking spots as I nervously walk past. I pass a dead end and see the kid again, walking towards the dead end. I do a double take. Gone. By now alarm bells are ringing in my head, so I run to a friend's house. He lives next door to the school. I see that he is having dinner, so I talk to his cat without disturbing him and make my way back onto the school. I see the boy looking directly at me through a wall of tires, so I get out my phone and take a video. I can see him on my phone. I say there he is, behind the tires. I pause the recording and start advancing towards the tires, but he ducks out of sight. I continue filming. I'm at the tire wall now, and nearby is some concrete ground with a snakes and ladders board painted on. While I do not see the boy, some small stones are audible and I myself see them land as if thrown carelessly at me. By now my phone is shaking. I make my way around the school, still filming, but my phone runs out of space. The moment I stop filming, I hear a loud crash directly behind me, so I sprint towards my friend's house again and climb over the metal fence that the school erected. I'm now tapping on a glass door to try and get their attention when I hear the fence make a noise as if it's being climbed over. I'm eventually let in and explain my story to my friend and his mom. I show them the video of the tires. There he is, behind the tires, but the boy isn't on the video. There is empty space where his head was looking at me. My friend is spooked and his mom is interested in the story. Friend's dad drives me the short walk home. What the hell just happened? I'm here to get further information about the stuff that's been happening since last year or so. Last summer, I went to my room. I wasn't really paying attention to anything, but then I saw a weird gray shadow, around half a meter away from me, and it jumped at me and then just disappeared. Few days later, I saw a see-through figure going across the road. Today, I was laying on my bed and from the shelves where clothes are stacked up, a belt fell down without anyone touching it. There wasn't any possibility it could fall as it was tucked almost at the back of the shelf. I also heard it move once or twice while it was on the ground. I was talking about my granddad, that passed away when I was 3, few minutes before, and I was wondering if it has any relation? Also, my dad keeps his grandma's ashes in a storage room that is next to my room. Mom said she sometimes heard stairs creaking while no dog was home. We didn't have a cat at that time either. Around a month or two, Mom said she saw a shadow go away from my little sister's bed at night, and my sister got scared and asked if she can sleep in Mom's bed. Things similar to that were happening since my sister's birth. It keeps scaring me. Are there any things I can do? I don't feel threatened or anything, but these things keep happening at random times and I get a mini heart attack. I'd be happy for any information or help. I can't buy anything in this regard either, so please try not to recommend anything including money. Thanks. The week of Mardi Gras, I decided to drive out to New Orleans to surprise some friends of mine. We all had a great time. When on long road trips, I'm usually looking at the road or the scenery going by while talking with my girlfriend Carrie or listening to music via my iPhone. On the morning of February 24th, I checked out of the Wyndham Hotel early so as to get a jump on the traffic coming into New Orleans for the annual Mardi Gras festivities. I wanted to get out of the city before the traffic became too insane to deal with. I got out just in the nick of time. I was awake and alert while driving and concentrating on the drive ahead of me. Not long after leaving the vicinity of Baton Rouge heading westbound on I-10, and going through the wetlands of Louisiana, I became aware of a presence in my car. Out of the peripheral vision of my right eye, I saw a young woman. She had long, wavy black hair and was wearing big, round sunglasses, kind of like the type that were in style back in the 1960s. Picture Jackie Onassis. When I looked right at her, she would be gone. She never looked at me, but only at the road ahead. She never said a word, even when I spoke to her. Hey, talking to a ghost. Instead of continuing on I-10, which would lead me into Houston, I took a right turn onto I-96 in Beaumont and then a left on 105. From that point on, I never saw her again. I am left wondering who she was and why she chose to ride with me out of New Orleans in the middle of the night. My story started when I was 7 years old while I was still living in my grandma's house in Cebu City. My grandma's house was built in the 1950s and it's a 2-story house with 6 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. There are a lot of paranormal stories in my grandma's house where our neighbors across told us that in the middle of the night they get to see a white lady on the Camito stairapple tree. Such also our other neighbors from the bottom said there are duendes living in the bodega in the storage room. This story of mine started inside my grandma's house. It was 10 p.m. and suddenly there was a brownout. When that happened I wanted to go to the kitchen, but I was scared because it was too dark in the living room, and while going to the kitchen you still have to pass by the long table in the living room and after that a hallway. So I thought of not going, but I really wanted to go, so I toughened myself and decided to go. It was dark. When I was about to pass the long table in the living room, a finger poked me by my calves, like a poke when it tried to ask for your attention. I was so scared and went back my original way 180. But then I saw my grandpa heading us seems going to the kitchen, so I decided to go with him. My grandpa is a godly man, and I thought of myself, if I follow him and hold his shirt on his back, maybe the thing that poked me won't touch me, since I am with my grandpa and he is a godly man. So when I was holding my grandpa's shirt behind the back, we approached a long table. As soon we reached the area where I got poked, the thing did not poke me anymore, but it made a sound, a very scary sound that gives you goosebumps. A sound that describes a dark monstrous entity with a black skin all over and with a red eye. So that's my story that I have experienced when I was a kid. 33 years ago, my parents bought a new built house when I was 3. They had 2 more children, and still live there to this day. My parents and us 3 kids lived there happily. It's been a great family home. I don't think it's haunted, and am quite a skeptical person. But this is an account my sister told me. To this day it fascinates me. One evening, my sister invited a friend round. They were in the living room, chatting, catching up. The living room is a good size, with sofas against the walls either side and an oak table in the middle. TV in the corner and a lovely big open fireplace at the end in the center. It was quite late at night, and as they were chatting and catching up, my sister and her friend stopped mid-conversation and one said to the other, "Do you see that?" And apparently, they could both see a figure standing to the left of the fireplace. He just appeared. They could describe what he was wearing, cord trousers and a maroon jumper, and as they looked up, my sister said she recognized him to be our granddad. She then said he just simply vanished. They were obviously shocked at this point, and pretty much called it a night. The thing is, they both saw this. I have a lot of questions myself and am gutted I didn't see this, as not only would it have been nice to see my granddad once more, he passed about 20 years ago and this occurred soon after, but the fact that they both saw a figure. I just can't get my head around this. Any thought or questions appreciated, thanks. It's my second story posting in YGS. I am writing this story to know that if my grandma is still with us. First of all, I love my grandma a lot. She used to pamper a lot. I used to live with my grandma since I was 3 years. But she died when I was 9. I used to cry a lot whenever I think about her. Even now I am getting tears. Now coming to the story. We had changed house because my grandma died. Many times I felt like she was with me. When I watch horror movie I used to scare like anything. That time I used to feel like don't worry, nothing will happen. I used get some dare. One night I was sleeping with my mom, no one was there in the house. I think it was midnight, I don't know time. Suddenly in my sleep I had listened my grandma voice calling my mom. I thought that was my dream. But damn sure I was awake. I sat on bed thinking about it, then again I listened her voice. I first scared because my mom was in deep sleep and no one was there in home. I thought she won't harm me and went back to sleep without waking my mom. Next morning I said to mom about that. She smiled at it. I asked her why. She said that whenever she worry about anything or cry about anything in sleep, definitely she will get a dream about her mother and father. As my grandfather died early. Another thing is, one day I got high fever in the afternoon and came home from the school. My father went to another city. My mother don't know what to do. Then our servant came home asking that if anything happened to me. We both wondered and asked how she know. She said that while she just take a nap for some time, she got dream that my grandmother saying her to go home. She was forcing her to go quickly. If anyone will say if my grandmother was with me. Sorry for my weak English. Comments are most welcome.